let's start with the Freedom of Information controversy. In Alberta, there is a piece of legislation, as I mentioned, that's known as the Freedom of Information and Privacy Act, which we all refer to as the FOIP laws, because otherwise we would never say anything else but the name of the act. So now that I've explained the acronym, can you, Karen and Graham, kind of explain why the PCs were being grilled over it this week? This is not a new piece of legislation.
I think we need to contextualize this a little bit too. So our Fatal Care series, which we'll talk about in a minute, broke on the Monday. And by Wednesday, Deputy Premier Thomas Lukaszuk was on the phone with the Privacy Commissioner trying to establish a new process for managing high-profile FOIPs, specifically from media and opposition parties. What they wanted to do was control the release of this information. Now, the Premier said yesterday, denied completely that it had anything to do with the Fatal Care series, but I mean, it is laughable. By Friday, they had implemented this new process. So there's that. I think the other thing that's really important to notice here is that Paul and Graham and I, and anybody in journalism or in politics, will know that the FOIP process is heavily, heavily politicized, that they mess with your FOIPs all the time. But what we had this week that we've never seen before is documented proof. And it reaches right up into the Premier's office. This was not just a memo sent among civil servants. This was not just some backroom chatter or phone call from someone inside the system like Paula Gott saying, they're messing with your request. This was a documented memo from the Deputy Premier to the Premier saying we are instituting a politicized process to meddle in FOIP requests, and that is unprecedented. I think the biggest flaw with the system as it stands right now is not the legislation. And all of the opposition parties yesterday, when I asked, said, we have an adequate oversight process in place. The problem is that Jill Clayton's office is dramatically underfunded. If you put in an access to information request, they have 30, 60 days to respond to you. If you don't like what they give you, you have the right to appeal to the commissioner's office. At this point, they are booking those appeals 2 years, 3 years in advance. I mean, you are waiting. That's why Fatal Care took 4 years, because the negotiation process and then waiting for Jill Clayton's office to answer was a 4-year process. That is not a problem with the law. That is a problem with staffing in her office. So, and that's what we heard from the opposition parties last week.
And she's dependent on an all-party committee of the legislature for her funding. And on the all-party committee, guess who has the most members? Oh, wait, that would be the government, the people with the least public interest in having their dirty laundry exposed.
Yeah, if they were really committed to full transparency and accountability, they'd fund that office adequately so that people could be seeing, 2, 3, 4 month turnarounds on their access to information requests. As it stands right now, it's really, I say to other reporters, don't bother with a request that's going to lose its political value in a couple of months, because if they don't want to give it to you, they'll just screw you around for a couple of years, and by the time you get it, it's not newsworthy anymore. So focus on long-term requests that are actually going to give you bang for your buck no matter when they come out.
There is no government in the world that loves privacy, access to information legislation, because access to information legislation inevitably exposes flaws and mistakes that a government has made. What I meant wasn't so much that Alberta is the only jurisdiction that meddles. What I meant is that after 40 years of one-party rule, we have created a public service that is so intertwined with the party and the government that, as I've said before, we haven't just blurred the lines. It's a Robin Thicke song around here.
The images. Does this show that there need to be changes to